Counterstrike is considered the biggest competitive shooter in the world, but it also has the worst cheating situation out of any major game. So why do we have more cheaters than ever before, and after years of complaints, Valve is doing very little about it? Now, the most common explanations you'll find are these. Valve are incompetent and lazy, they don't care, and it's impossible to fully fix cheating. And although these explanations seem plausible, I don't think any of them really make too much sense if you actually think about them for more than 5 minutes. So I started to wonder if we've been looking at this completely wrong, because what if Valve isn't failing to stop cheaters? What if they don't actually want them gone? And the more I dug into Valve's business model, the more this theory started to make disturbing sense. But for you to understand it, you first have to understand the main goal of Valve, the company. Valve is a business. Do you know what is the main goal of any business? Profit. Now, if capitalism was perfect, the profit of a company would be directly tied to the quality of the product they make. Build a better game, make more money. And this was actually the case for a while. Let's take Portal 2 as an example, one of Valve's most successful game launches ever. It wasn't literally bug-free, but it had remarkably few serious technical issues, especially compared to most AAA games at the time. On top of that, the game was super innovative and just, genuinely fun to play. So, reviewers gave it amazing scores, players recommended it to their friends, the positive reputation kept spreading, and because the game cost around $50 at release, every new player who wanted to experience it had to buy a copy. Valve's profits were directly tied to making the best game possible. But now let's look at Counterstrike. Before that, guys, there are two things I love in this world: monkeys and skins. Here's my Discord profile picture for the last 10 years, and here is my combo. But what if we combine them? We get Skinsmonkey. The best way to trade skins, you simply select any skin you want and find items in your inventory of equal value. I also managed to get a promo code for my viewers, so if you type TwistCS2 here, you'll get $5 free by trading over $100 in skins. And if you make a deposit, Skinsmonkey will give you a 35% deposit bonus using the same code. Personally, I think they have the fastest trading website on the market, and if you want to support my videos, plus literally get some free money, go click the link in the description and get your dream combo today. But now let's look at Counterstrike. Although earlier versions you had to pay for, nowadays you can download it for free and only pay $15 for Prime, once you realize that non-Prime servers are pretty much unplayable. But even then, those $15 aren't even close to Valve's biggest source of revenue. It's this. And this. And this.
Oh my god.
This is the model that Fortnite really pushed to the mainstream. Get players in for free, then make your money back through microtransactions. And if it's done correctly, the average player will spend far more on cosmetics over their lifetime than they ever would have paid for the game itself. And once you understand that, it suddenly makes a lot more sense why almost half of Valve's recent updates on Counter-Strike are focused around cases, collections, and the armory. Because unlike Portal 2, where Valve earned your money before you even launched the game, Counter-Strike only makes serious money if players stick around long enough to start spending. But wait, wouldn't that still mean that a better game with no cheaters, perfect hit reg, and just happy fans bring in more new players who try the game and therefore start spending money on skins? Yes, but we're missing a crucial piece of the puzzle. And for things to start making sense, we first have to identify who spends the most money on Counter-Strike. Let's divide Counter-Strike players into 3 groups. So let's start with the noobs. These are people who probably have 3 other games they play more than Counter-Strike. They're just looking to hop on Dust 2 every once in a while, run around with a P90 and have some fun. Nothing wrong with that, by the way. At least not for me. But for Valve, there is a problem. These players simply care too little about Counter-Strike to invest much money into it. Why would you spend $50 trying to get a nice AK skin when you barely even play the game? That makes them a pretty unreliable source of income. Now, let's look at the serious players. At first glance, they seem like the perfect customers. Most people with thousands of hours have nice skins, they probably own a knife, they know which stickers are rare, which skins are good investments, and they clearly love the game. game. But the problem isn't that they aren't interested in skins. The problem is where they buy them. The average player with thousands of hours has watched enough Counter-Strike content to see countless third-party marketplace ads. They've also either learned through experience or from content creators just how terrible the return of investment is when opening cases. So if they want a particular skin, they're probably not going to overpay for it on the Steam market or gamble hundreds of dollars trying to unbox it, they're simply going to buy it somewhere cheaper. And once starting to take the game more seriously, many players also move to face it. And once that happens, armory stars don't even collect XP anymore, so buying the pass suddenly makes very little sense. So instead of spending money inside Valve's ecosystem, the average serious player spends it somewhere Valve earns no revenue from. And now we come to the casuals. If we put Counter-Strike players on a normal distribution graph, these are the 60% sitting right in the middle. They play enough to actually care about the game, to want nice skins and spend money, and they've probably also seen clips of people getting insanely lucky opening cases and, naturally want to try it themselves. But even if they don't want to gamble, casual players are just much more likely to buy skins directly from Steam. Why? Well, because it feels official and safe. Steam owns Counter-Strike, so buying a skin there doesn't require learning about trading, API scams, or wondering whether some random website is trustworthy. Sure, third-party marketplaces are much cheaper, but to a casual player, paying a little extra often feels worth it for the convenience alone. Obviously, there are also exceptions. I mean, some serious players still spend thousands and some casuals never spend anything. But on average, Valve's most profitable customer is the casual. And so if a casual spends even modestly on cases and Steam market purchases over several years, they're ultimately worth far more to Valve than a serious player who barely spends money inside Valve's ecosystem. And once you understand this, the next question from Valve's POV becomes crystal clear. How do you get as many noobs as possible to become casuals and keep them there for as long as possible? Stop. No, this is not another ad break. I opened a Discord with a lot of cool features and I'm currently running a Huntsman Autotronic giveaway. Join to enter, I promise the server is good. This is where Valve's strategy becomes interesting. The goal isn't necessarily to make Counter-Strike perfect. The goal is to make a game that is good enough to hook millions of people and keep them coming back. Because once you've switched from selling a game to selling microtransactions, perfection isn't automatically the most profitable outcome. Every improvement has a cost. Not just the money spent building it, but also the opportunity cost of what those developers could have been working on instead. Like Deadlock. Let's take cheating as an example. Obviously, Valve could invest more resources into anti-cheat, they could hire more engineers, improve detection systems, spend more time manually reviewing suspicious players. But all of that costs money. And more importantly, all of that has to generate a return. Because inside Valve, the question probably isn't, would players like better anti-cheat? Of course they would, everyone would, they know this. The real question is, would fixing this problem make us enough additional money to justify the investment? And so when you look at Counter-Strike through that lens, some interesting things start to appear. For starters, Counter-Strike isn't a brand new game that's trying to prove itself anymore. It's over 27 years old. It's arguably the most iconic competitive shooter ever made. So unlike a brand new game, Valve doesn't need overwhelmingly positive reviews every month to convince people it's good. Most gamers have heard about Counter-Strike, some think it's the greatest FPS game ever made, some think it's full of cheaters, but almost everyone has already formed an opinion about it. I mean, people have been complaining about cheaters for well over a decade, yet every year new players still install it. The game is simply too established for those cheating complaints to dramatically affect the number of people trying it. And now let's look at the most important point yet. Who is actually affected by cheaters the most? Looking at Premier Season 5, around half the player base sits below 13k rating. At these ranks, cheating is significantly less common, simply because cheaters naturally climb. A rage hacker isn't going to stay in the blue ranks for, more than a day. The real cheating problem becomes much more noticeable once you reach around 20k and above. That is only 13% of the player base. So from Valve's perspective, the damage is concentrated among a relatively small group. A small group that, as we discussed, isn't even making Valve the most money. What is making Valve the most money is turning new players into casuals and keeping them there. So let's look at Counter-Strike through the lens of a new player. The game already feels incredibly responsive, the gunplay feels satisfying, the movement feels unique. Landing your first deagle headshot is addictive. Counter-Strike is more than good enough to make a newcomer want to play another match. But the interesting part is what happens next. As players improve, they start understanding the game on a deeper level. Now, they can actually recognize when something feels off. They begin noticing deaths behind walls, inconsistent hit registration, the ranking problems, the networking complaints, and because they're climbing the ranks, they also encounter cheaters more often. And this is the point where a lot of casual players stop continuously progressing. As you start noticing these problems, instead of every session feeling rewarding, you are annoyed more often than not. So, what do most people do? They just go play something else. Then, a week later, maybe a month later, they've forgotten about how shitty it felt to play against a cheater, they see a Counter-Strike clip, their friends ask them to queue, a new collection comes out, and suddenly they're back. Only now they're rusty, their aim has dropped off, their rank has disappeared, and they're essentially back to playing Counter-Strike as a casual again. And then the cycle repeats. Get hooked, play for a couple of weeks, try to get the skin from the new update, start running into the same problems, take another break, and then come back later. If casuals kept having fun instead of gradually running into more frustration, many of them would naturally keep learning about the game itself rather than just queuing Premiere. They'd start watching content creators, discover third-party marketplaces, realize how bad case odds actually are, and eventually move to face it. In other words, they'd become serious Counter-Strike players. But instead, many players seem to remain in this perpetual casual loop. They enjoy the game enough to keep coming back, but not enough to fully commit. So maybe the question was never, why hasn't Valve fixed Counter-Strike? Maybe the real question is, why would Valve fix the parts of Counter-Strike that make them the most money? And if the perfect Counter-Strike player isn't the one who plays the most, but the one who plays just enough to buy another case, then maybe the game is already working exactly as intended.